Okay, today we're going to look at another tool for visualizing climate data, ultimately a tool that we're going to use for designing with climate data. It's called Ladybug, and there's a whole suite of assorted tools like Honeybee, and you can download it, you can Google it. What you're going to ultimately get is a um, folder here with a bunch of files, and if you just go into Rhino and open up Grasshopper, and you drag the installer.gh into your Grasshopper window, which I've already done, so I'm not going to do it again. You may have to restart Rhino. It'll install Ladybug, Honeybee, a bunch of other stuff. So that's what we're going to use. And what these tools do is they allow you to design with climate data, but they also allow you to access climate data. And so to do that, let's look at how we would visualize temperature over a day. So the first thing you're going to want is all the stuff in the import here. And you're going to want to download weather, which is where you find the climate information. And to do that, you can use this component called EPW map. Um, and so let's go ahead and do that. So the first thing you need is you need a little Boolean toggle, which is just a way of turning this thing on and off. And you can see when you connect it up like that, this will all turn gray. And what you're also going to need is what's called a panel, which is just a place where you can put like text, which is going to connect to this weather URL. So this component is going to help us find the weather URL. So if I switch this, double click to switch that to true, it'll open up Chrome and it gives you this interface and you can search on Dixon. And this allows you to find places that have climate data that is tied to the map. Unfortunately, Dixon doesn't really have a nearby weather station with data available, and the choices are either in Los Alamos or Taos. I'm going to go with the Los Alamos Airport one. So I'm going to click, and that says that there's this sort of TMY2 file, which is kind of what you want. And I'm going to click copy, and that's going to copy the URL of this file to the clipboard, and I can paste it into this panel, and I can hook it up here. Turn that to false. Right, and this gives me some outputs. These are your Grasshopper outputs. And what we want is the outputs in the EPW file. So let's go back to Ladybug and import EPW. So connecting this to that, right? This helped us find the URL. The URL feeds into this component, which downloads the information, gives you the output, and then this thing essentially takes all that output and it sort of extracts all the information that you need. So the next thing we need to do is a way of taking this information and visualizing it, and Ladybug has a bunch of that built in. So if we go to visualize data, the first one is Ladybug hourly plot, which is kind of what we want, right? This is a bunch of stuff that some of which need input. Um, right? Basically, if we want to do an hourly plot of the dry bulb temperature, what we're doing is taking the dry bulb temperature and essentially just hooking it up to data, right? And you can see that what we get is a, is a really great chart that goes from midnight to midnight and tracks the dry bulb temperature in degrees Celsius for essentially every day of the year. Now, if what we want to do is, let's say, look at that in Fahrenheit, um, under, I think it's extra. Where is it? There's somewhere something. Um, oh, there it is. LV convert unit, something like that. LV2 unit, convert data collection unit to unit, right? And you can see what you need to do is if you hook this up, data, the all unit will tell you for that type of data, which is temperature data, what are the types of conversion, like the output you can get. C for Celsius, F for Fahrenheit, K for Kelvin. So we're going to give it that input. We're just going to put an F into another panel, put that into here, then send out the data to here. And now you can see, right, that this is updated. Um, so let's do one more thing. So I'm going to create um, I'm going to create a point just in Rhino. I'm going to uh, go to parameter, click on point, and then I'm going to right click on it and say set one point. I'm going to select that. And you can see it gets that little like X. Yours might be red or green. And when I click on it, it selects, right? If I put that into our hourly plot, right, it'll move the base point to be there, which is important because what we're going to do next, I'll sort of copy this point, is we're going to do this whole thing, but we are going to do it for your other location. So an easy way to do that, right? I'm just going to select all that, copy and paste. And now here I'm going to right click and say set one point, select that point. Oops, set one point. There we go. Right. And so this one, right, if I highlight it, you can see that's my lower. But right now it's fetching data from the same place. What we want, let's send that back to true, go back to our map. I'm going to use my same example, Krems on the Donau, and say like, okay, like here's some weather information. Copy. And I'm going to replace the URL in here. I'm just going to select it and paste. Cool, right? So now you can see we have something that tells us about how the temperature changes over the course of the day, every day. But there's one thing left that's a little bit of a problem, right? You can see that red and red don't necessarily mean the same thing. So um, we need to make sure that we have the same set of colors for both, the same scale for both. Let's look at how we can do that. So what one of the parameters this takes is a legend parameter. I'm going to go back to Ladybug, visualize data, um, and uh, actually, I've totally forgotten how to do this. So I'm going to pause the video for just 1 second, and then I'll be right back. Okay, so I figured it out, right? Under extra, LB legend parameters, right? That gives you an output that's legpar, and you can see this has an output that's like legend parameter. And so this allows you to customize certain things about the legend. So we can see here our data goes from like -5 degrees to 91 degrees. Here it goes from 10 degrees to 93 degrees. So let's say we want our minimum to be -10. And let's say we want our maximum to be 100. Right? And then what we want to do then is we want to put that in here. Right? And you can see now we go from -10 to 100. And if we hook up the same thing to here, right, it means changes to, that the legends will be exactly the same, right? So the other thing right now, this is kind of awkward because -10, 1, 12, right? So if we hook up something, right, if we do change the number of segments, right, now we get, I put in a 6, I get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? If we put in 12, right, now we get 12 segments, which divides them up pretty evenly, which is really nice, right? So now you can see that it's apples to apples. Like red means 100, red means 100. Um, you know, light blue means 20, light blue means 20 in Fahrenheit. And what's interesting is you can see that the heat of the day in Krems, for example, it really seems to be peaking in most months much more around like 6 p.m., whereas the heat of the day in Dixon seems to be coming a little bit earlier. Um, right? Super interesting stuff. So the last thing that we want to do is, right, because this is created in Grasshopper, um, it means that like the data is not yet in Rhino in a way that you can export it, right? So if I like switch to a different Grasshopper file, you can see it disappears except for points. Um, so what we need to do to get the data out is if you click on your hourly plot and then you say bake, which is this little fried egg thing here, just say okay. And then you click on your hourly plot and you say bake. Okay. You can see now, if we zoom in, especially if we go to a shaded mode, right, that we have our information here in ways um, that we could get out of, we could export out of Rhino. Oops, let's just let's see one last thing that might be sort of useful is if you don't want to bake all of that stuff, like the mesh. So if you go and you get a parameter that's just geometry and you hook it up to just the mesh, uh, and if I go and I use this little blindfold guy, all right, you can see now you have just that thing. If you get another geometry parameter, you hook it up to the legend, right? In case you want to bake all this stuff separately. And then you could just go and click the little bake icon for that, bake icon for this. In any event, later on in the semester, we'll look at how you can start to actually use this information inside of a design process. But for now, I think this is really a useful way of um, visualizing the climate data and seeing how it's different.